The $100 trillion Arctic War. Nobody's talking about. The Arctic ice is melting. But what's underneath isn't just water. It's the largest unclaimed treasure in human history. And while America debates climate change, 3 superpowers are quietly carving up the North Pole like a birthday cake. Last month, a Chinese icebreaker reached the geographic North Pole. Not for science, not for research, for something far more valuable. They were mapping the ocean floor, cataloging resources, and establishing what Beijing calls polar presence. The West barely noticed. That was the point. What I discovered in classified shipping manifests and Arctic Council transcripts will change how you see the next 50 years. Because this isn't about polar bears or melting glaciers. This is about $100 trillion in untapped resources and the 3 nations willing to fight a frozen war to claim them. Russia has been militarizing the Arctic since 2014, building 42 new military installations above the Arctic Circle. China, despite being nowhere near the Arctic, has declared itself a near-Arctic state and launched 11 polar expeditions in 5 years. And America? America just woke up. The Greenland Purchase isn't dead. It's dormant. And when you see what lies beneath the ice, you'll understand why Trump wasn't crazy. He was just early. But here's what nobody's telling you. The race for Arctic dominance isn't happening in 20 years when the ice fully melts. It's happening now. In submarine bases carved into ice shelves, in dual-use research stations that look scientific but serve military purposes, in shipping routes that bypass traditional chokepoints and rewrite global trade. The Northwest Passage opened for commercial shipping last summer. For the first time in human history, cargo ships sailed directly from Europe to Asia through Canadian Arctic waters, cutting the journey by 2 weeks and avoiding the Suez Canal entirely. That's not just convenient. That's geopolitically revolutionary. What does this mean? Any nation controlling Arctic shipping lanes controls 30% of future global trade. Any nation dominating Arctic resources owns the raw materials for the next technological revolution. And any nation commanding Arctic airspace controls the shortest missile routes between continents. 3 empires understand this. 1 is preparing for war. 1 is preparing for profit. 1 is preparing excuses. Let me show you how the modern Arctic looks when viewed through military satellites and resource surveys instead of climate documentaries. First, the Russian fortress. Moscow has transformed the Arctic from frozen wasteland into a militarized zone spanning 11 time zones. The Nagurskoye Air Base, constructed inside the Arctic Circle, can deploy fighter jets to any point in the Arctic Ocean within hours. The Trefoil Base resembles something from a science fiction film, a fortress designed to operate year-round in conditions that would kill most humans in minutes. But Russia isn't just building bases, they're building cities. Murmansk, population 300,000, serves as headquarters for the Northern Fleet. Arkhangelsk processes Arctic shipping and resource extraction. These aren't temporary outposts. They're permanent infrastructure designed to support massive industrial operations. The crown jewel is Russia's nuclear icebreaker fleet. America has 2 functioning icebreakers. Russia has 41, including 4 nuclear-powered ships capable of smashing through ice 15 feet thick. These aren't just ships. They're mobile military bases that can establish Russian presence anywhere Arctic ice exists. Putin's Arctic strategy isn't defensive. It's expansionist. Russian submarines now patrol beneath the polar ice cap year-round. Russian bombers conduct routine flights over disputed territories, and Russian oil rigs extract resources from waters other nations consider international. The message is clear. Russia treats the Arctic as internal waters, not global commons. Now, China's invisible infiltration. Beijing doesn't need Arctic territory to dominate Arctic resources. They need Arctic access. And they're getting it through economic penetration disguised as scientific cooperation. China's Polar Silk Road sounds peaceful. In reality, it's strategic positioning. Chinese companies are financing Arctic mining projects in Greenland, funding port construction in Iceland, and providing technology for Russian Arctic development. Every dollar invested creates leverage. Every infrastructure project creates dependence. The genius is that China enters as a partner, not a competitor. They provide capital Russian Arctic projects desperately need. They offer technology transfer Greenland's small economy cannot refuse. They position themselves as the helpful neighbor, while America argues about budgets. But look deeper at Chinese Arctic activities. Their research stations collect more than weather data. They map underwater topography, measure ice thickness, and monitor submarine traffic. Their icebreaker expeditions include military personnel disguised as civilians. Their mining investments prioritize rare earth minerals essential for military technology. China is building Arctic capabilities without Arctic territory. When the ice melts, they'll have infrastructure, relationships, and leverage throughout the region without firing a shot. And what's America's response? Bureaucratic confusion mixed with wishful thinking. The United States Coast Guard released a report declaring America not ready for Arctic competition. The Navy admitted it lacks sufficient Arctic-capable ships. The Pentagon acknowledged that Russian Arctic military capabilities exceed American capabilities by factors of 10 to 1. Congressional hearings focus on climate change while competitors focus on military positioning. Environmental groups oppose Arctic development while rivals exploit it. Academic institutions study Arctic governance while adversaries create Arctic facts on the ground. America's Arctic infrastructure is embarrassingly inadequate. Alaska has military bases, but they're designed for Cold War threats, not modern Arctic competition. The Northwest Passage runs through Canadian waters, but America has no treaty guaranteeing access during crises. Greenland's strategic location makes it invaluable, but Danish control limits American options. The irony is profound. America possesses massive Arctic territories through Alaska, but lacks the political will to militarize them. America recognizes Arctic resources' strategic value, but restricts their development through environmental regulations. America understands Arctic shipping lanes' importance, but depends on allies to secure them. While America debates, competitors advance. Here's the nuclear-powered elephant in the room. Arctic control isn't just about trade routes and mining rights. It's about intercontinental ballistic missile defense and submarine warfare. The shortest route for ICBMs between America and Russia passes over the North Pole. Any nation controlling Arctic airspace can intercept missiles mid-flight. That's not theoretical. It's the foundation of modern nuclear deterrence. Arctic submarine warfare represents an entirely new domain of military competition. Nuclear submarines can hide beneath polar ice for months, invisible to satellite surveillance. They can launch missiles from positions no defensive system expects. They can attack shipping lanes far from traditional naval chokepoints. Russia's submarine activity in the Arctic has tripled since 2014. Chinese submarines have been detected near Alaska's exclusive economic zone. American submarine patrols struggle with ice navigation and extreme weather conditions that Russian and Chinese crews train for continuously. The stakes couldn't be clearer. Future wars might be won or lost in waters that are frozen solid today, but the real shock isn't military. It's economic. Conservative estimates suggest the Arctic contains 22% of the world's undiscovered oil and natural gas. That's more energy than Saudi Arabia's proven reserves. Arctic rare earth mineral deposits could supply global demand for centuries. Arctic shipping routes could handle 40% of international trade once ice barriers disappear. $100 trillion. That's the conservative estimate of total Arctic resource value. For perspective, that exceeds the combined GDP of China and America. Whoever controls these resources controls the next phase of global development. Whoever controls Arctic shipping lanes controls the economic lifelines between continents. Whoever controls Arctic territory controls the geographic foundation of 22nd century power. Russia knows this. China knows this. America is learning. The question isn't whether Arctic competition will intensify. The question is whether America will participate as an equal competitor or a declining spectator. Because while Washington focused on Middle Eastern oil for 20 years, the real prize was accumulating beneath polar ice. While America spent trillions democratizing Afghanistan, competitors were militarizing the Arctic. While American politicians argued about renewable energy, rival nations secured fossil fuel reserves that will power the next 50 years. Here's the uncomfortable reality nobody discusses publicly. Climate change isn't just an environmental crisis. It's a geopolitical reshuffling that advantages some nations and disadvantages others. Melting ice doesn't just threaten polar bears, it reveals resources and shipping lanes that will determine future power balances. Nations with Arctic territories gain massive advantages. Nations with Arctic capabilities can exploit those advantages. Nations with Arctic strategies can shape outcomes. Nations without Arctic presence become irrelevant. The Arctic isn't melting randomly, it's melting strategically. And here's what happens next. As ice coverage decreases, military presence will increase. As shipping routes open, territorial disputes will intensify. As resource extraction becomes feasible, international law will be tested. Russia will claim larger portions of the Arctic Ocean based on underwater ridge formations. China will demand Arctic access rights as compensation for environmental damage they didn't cause. America will eventually recognize that Arctic control determines superpower status. The signs are already visible. Putin announced new Arctic territorial claims last year. Xi Jinping elevated Arctic policy to national priority status. Biden created America's first national Arctic strategy in decades. The $100 trillion war isn't coming. It's here. Fighting is conducted through infrastructure development and international law manipulation, rather than conventional military operations. But make no mistake, this is warfare by other means. The prize is too valuable, and the competition too intense for peaceful resolution. Someone will dominate the Arctic. Someone will control $100 trillion in resources. Someone will command the shipping routes of the future. 3 nations understand this. Only one is currently winning, and it's not America. The Arctic War isn't about ice, it's about everything underneath. And everything underneath will determine who controls everything else. The clock is ticking. The ice is melting. And the superpowers are positioning for the largest resource grab in human history. What America does in the next 5 years will determine whether it remains a superpower or becomes a spectator to the new Arctic order. The North Pole isn't just the top of the world anymore. It's the center of the next global power struggle. And winter is coming, for someone's dominance. But let me show you something that will make this even more personal. This isn't just about distant superpowers fighting over frozen wastelands. This is about the prices you pay, the routes your packages travel, and the security of the infrastructure you depend on. When Arctic shipping lanes fully open, your Amazon delivery from Asia could arrive 2 weeks faster. When Arctic rare earth mining begins at scale, your smartphone components could cost half as much. When Arctic oil and gas reach markets, your energy bills could drop significantly. Or none of that could happen if the wrong nation controls access. Imagine China controlling the fastest shipping route between Europe and Asia. Imagine Russia monopolizing Arctic rare earth deposits. Imagine America locked out of Arctic resources entirely. Every dollar you spend on technology, every gallon of fuel you purchase, every product you order online would flow through systems controlled by nations that don't necessarily prioritize American interests. The Arctic War isn't happening in some distant future. It's determining the prices, choices, and opportunities available to you right now. Here's the deeper strategic reality most analysis misses. The Arctic isn't just valuable because of what's underneath the ice. It's valuable because of what's above it. The shortest flight paths for intercontinental missiles, the hidden submarine highways, and the satellite communication routes that connect continents. Control the Arctic, and you control the communications infrastructure between North America, Europe, and Asia. Lose the Arctic, and you depend on other nations for everything from internet traffic to missile defense. This is why Russia has invested over $100 billion in Arctic militarization since 2014. This is why China has declared Arctic development a core interest, despite being 3,000 miles from the nearest Arctic territory. This is why American military leaders privately describe Arctic competition as the most serious long-term threat to national security. The $100 trillion war isn't just about money. It's about the geographic foundation of future power. And America is running out of time to catch up, because while we've been analyzing this competition, our competitors have been winning it. Russian Arctic military capabilities now exceed American capabilities in every meaningful category. Chinese economic penetration has created dependencies throughout the region. American Arctic strategy exists mostly on paper. The question isn't whether America can compete in the Arctic. The question is whether America can afford not to. The ice is melting. The resources are real. The competition is intensifying, and the nation that controls the Arctic will control the terms of 21st century power. The real war has already begun. Most people just don't know it yet. But now you do. Think about this when you see climate headlines, when politicians debate environmental policy, when you hear about melting ice caps. Behind every degree of warming, there's a $1 trillion calculation in Moscow, Beijing, and Washington. Behind every melting glacier, there's a military base being planned. Behind every expedition, there's a territorial claim. The Arctic isn't just changing climatically, it's changing geopolitically. The nation that adapts fastest will inherit the Earth. The $100 trillion war isn't coming, it's here. The only question is whether America will fight to win or accept defeat by default. The ice is melting, the clock is ticking, and the future belongs to whoever claims it first.